In this video, I'm going to talk all about the hits and misses of the curriculum we have used for this past year, 2024-2025, for my grade 1 and grade 5 student. So if you're interested in hearing what we liked and what didn't work so well for us, stick around. Just as a caveat, when I say that something is a miss, it doesn't really mean that the curriculum itself is not a good curriculum. It just means that it wasn't a good fit for us this year. Some of the misses are things that have been hits for us in previous years, but just didn't work well for us this year. Homeschool curriculum in general, I've never really come across that I would just give a bad review on and think you should not buy or stay away from, because they all have their pros and cons, and they don't necessarily work in the same way for all students. And so you really have to, I like to try out new things, and when I feel something is not working, we pick up something new, give it a try. Sometimes that can be tricky because curriculum can cost a lot, but I love that there's a lot of things out there that are more accessible and even free. So I'm going to start with our family subjects, and I'm going to start with the hits first, and then I'll go over the misses. So for us, a huge hit that really helped us successfully get through science this year was Berean Builder's Science in the Beginning. Now, a big part of why it worked so well for us this year is that we did it together with our co-op. I led it, I taught it, but we had to maintain that accountability with each other to make sure that we were always continuing with each lesson, that we weren't missing anything each week. I was accountable to the other parents and to the students. And so we pressed through and finished out the year and completed the entire textbook. That often doesn't happen for us. We often don't finish science. We start off strong and slowly it pitters out. We don't have many science curriculum that we finished every last lesson and finished the entire book. It worked really well for us. I do have other videos where I talk about it, but I just think it's a really great science curriculum to do for a whole span of ages. Our co-op included children from kindergarten all the way up to grade 9, and it has activities in there for the younger student, the middle student, and the older student to give them an extra challenge or to simplify things for that age level. But the lessons were short and sweet. The experiments were really manageable and easy to do every week with very little preparation. And so that was a huge hit for us, particularly because we were consistent along with our co-op. Another really big hit for us this year was Shakespeare. However, it's also slightly a miss. We planned on doing a different Shakespeare play for every term. We do 3 terms, and so we were going to be covering 3 Shakespeare plays. Ideally, I actually planned on covering only 2 this year. I realized that the Alvieri schedule was just moving through it too quickly for us. And so we slowed it down a lot. We really just read a single scene each week, and we completed the entire play in the year. Now, we finished it early, but at the end of the year, as a co-op, because some of the other families in our co-op also read it, we performed a play and recorded it, and each student played a role in Hamlet, and it was a lot of fun. And it was fun to go through it more slowly, trying to cram in 2 or even 3 Shakespeare plays for these age groups of students. Again, I'm talking about kindergarten up to grade 8 and 9. The grade 8 and 9 could definitely handle more, but because we do a range of students, and in our own homeschool, I have a grade 1 and a grade 5 student, doing 1 Shakespeare play, 1 deep dive into the actual play, listening to the audio and reading along to Shakespeare's actual works rather than a retelling of Shakespeare. We have read retellings of Shakespeare in the past, but I would say that Shakespeare was a hit. Poetry and recitation was also a huge hit. This year we focused on one poem and one passage from Hamlet to memorize. Every 4 weeks we changed to a new one. And my kids were really able to, found it so fun to hear my grade 1 student quoting Shakespeare to me. And she wouldn't necessarily always know exactly what she was saying, but she knew every word line by line. And it's fun to challenge your memory and being able to memorize great verses and poetry and Shakespeare lines, especially the famous ones from Hamlet, was really, really fun to be able to do. Art study and composer study, I feel, was also a great hit for us this year, because rather than doing both each week, we alternated. 1 week we did an artist study and 1 week we did a composer study. And slowing it down in that way was a lot more successful for us. My children really enjoyed doing the art study, particularly looking at the picture and then trying to draw it from memory. And it just really helped them hone their attention to detail. And that really has worked well for us this year. It was also really interesting because a week ago we went to an art museum, and it was neat that my children knew different styles of paintings, like abstract versus impressionism, and it was just neat that they knew these things and they could pick out the styles that were similar to the artists that we had studied. And also, I would say, I wouldn't call this a huge hit, but we really had fun with Latin. We did Song School Monkey, and I did not follow the whole curriculum. We just used the flashcards, and each week went through another 10 words to add to and we would just memorize them. We would say them in English. They would have to say the Latin word. I would hold up the Latin word, and they would have to say the English word. And just adding again to their memory banks and knowing these root words in Latin, it was really for us more for fun, but it was quite successful, and it was so fun that both of my children, my youngest and my oldest, were able to memorize a huge stack of Latin cards by the end of the year. Now for family subjects for Mrs. History in general for us was a miss, I would say, this year. We were doing a story of the world, early modern history, as well as the Alvieri's Canadian history, and neither of them were really going over well with my kids. The stories were not fascinating them, and so because they weren't being fascinated by the stories just weren't sticking. Nothing was being retained. Even being able to, a week later say, what did we read about last week? None of them, they both struggled to narrate back what we had talked about. I really had to keep jogging their memory. Now, in years past, when we've done Story of the World, we definitely did a lot more of the activities, and I'm sure that played a big role in how much they were retaining, because the more fun you add to it, and doing some projects and crafts and maybe baking and things like that, it worked better. But these stories, just in general, these time periods for us are drier and not as interesting. So by the third term, I pulled back and I just started reading living books, stories from history, not specifically following an exact timeline, and just giving them bits and pieces of history, relating to other things that we were kind of learning about. And just so that we were doing something history related. But it made me really rethink how we will do history in our future. And I will talk about that in other videos. But this year, these time periods didn't work well for us, and my kids just weren't being drawn to it. They weren't really retaining anything, and it felt a little bit pointless. And I'm sure some of you have been through those struggles. And so we will be looking into doing something different for history in the future. Geography also was sort of a miss. This year, I plan to do our own geography. I wanted to find living books related to, so we have this big book, which I'll put a picture of it here, and we were starting off with the Rhine River. and following the Rhine River and looking at all the countries that were surrounding the Rhine River. And it started off great. We did Germany, we did Switzerland, I'm not sure what other, we did sort of deep dives into those two countries. We read some living books surrounding German history and Switzerland, and we did some activities, some food. I tried to really make it fun and interactive, but part of the problem was some of the countries, I just couldn't find any books about it. I couldn't find anything interesting to do. And so that can sometimes happen when you're planning your own curriculum. And it just became a fail because I kind of hit a wall where there wasn't any books related to make it more interesting. I had found some German fables, and we did really well with Germany, and we did fairly well with Switzerland. And then the next country, and I can't think of where I was at next, I think somewhere in France. There just wasn't anything that I could find, and it started to peter out, and it wasn't working well. But I realized also that my children didn't know a lot about Canadian geography, and so I purchased on Teachers Pay Teachers a simple worksheet like with a PowerPoint slide, work pages surrounding learning Canadian geography, the provinces, the capitals, something about each province, really basic in general. And that was okay, not super interesting, but it was good for them to at least be able to locate our provinces on a map and know the names of the capitals and a little bit about each province. It wasn't overly exciting, but it was something that was a place marker for geography, essentially, in our school week. So now I'll talk about grade 1. The hits for grade 1, actually, I'm looking at my sheet, and I put green H's for hits, and reds were the M's are misses, and they're all green. Everything really was a hit. I think because she's so new to doing curriculum that everything is exciting and new to a grade 1 student. It's the first time really doing workbook pages. It's the first time really doing all these things. And so her lessons are short and sweet. So there wasn't a fail for anything at all. We loved first language lessons was a hit. Writing with ease was a hit. Spelling workouts, super fast and easy. All of the reading materials and phonics that we went through, super fast and easy. Something I added in which she really loved and excelled in particularly was creative writing. Just on AI, I generated some story starters. I gave it some topics and ideas of things that I thought she would like. And I asked them to give me 10 different story starters, and each week I would give her one story starter. We'd cut it out, we'd paste it in her journal and tell her to write a story, continue on the story from there. And she really enjoyed doing that. And that helped her. Creative writing is something that a lot of curriculum at that age don't often try to foster, but I felt that she was ready to start being able to create her own stories, and she was writing well enough where she could write out her own stories that would be, being able to sound out her own words. And we didn't focus on spelling in the creative writing, but we did allow her just to create and write her own stories. And she does now really enjoy writing and making her own little books, which she does on her own during free time. And so I feel that her being able to see that she could create a story on her own really encouraged her to go with it and do that as a fun pastime. And Matthew C was a huge hit, and IXL has been a huge hit. She is in grade 1, and we are halfway through Matthew C Beta, which would be grade 2 math. And so I feel that we'll probably be finished it by the end of the summer because we are going to continue math through the summer, and she'll probably be starting the 3rd level of Matthew C, which is Alpha, Beta, Gamma. And I think she'll be starting Gamma in September. So it has been a huge hit. The lessons are short. They are it's mastery, and it masters one specific area of math, each book. So she finished Alpha quite early on. We started beta and we're halfway through beta at this point, which is we finished school at the end of May. We are now June, I think 18th is today that I'm recording this video. And we've been about 2 weeks in to our summer break, but we are doing math almost every single day. And another huge hit for her were our classic read-alouds. I read aloud to her every night before bed, and we have never gotten through so many classics in 1 year before, but we got through 16 classics this year. With my older daughter when she was in grade 1, I remember, I believe, recording a video about it, and we only read 9. So we did really, really well this year. She's loved every single book and has really enjoyed it. And it's been such a wonderful experience to be able to read all of these books again to my younger daughter and experience them with her. But it's been so much fun. One incentive that I've given to my kids to read the classics rather than just any book at all, just reading in general, but read the classics, is for every 5 classic books, I give them a $10 gift card for something. And so that has been a huge motivator, but she'll even forget. She's forgotten to even ask where we have a little sheet we mark off every time she has 5 books, and she doesn't even keep track. She just loves reading the books. And I'll tell her, oh, guess what? You just finished another 5 books. And of course she loves that, but she's not even keeping track of the prizes and where she's at. She just really loves to read the classic books with me. So now for hits and misses for my grade 5 student. She had some misses in her curriculum that we chose, but we'll start with the hits. A hit was when I changed up her language arts program, and we went with the Wonder House Creative. We did 2 research projects. We started with the Bermuda Triangle, and then we did the Yeti, and those were big hits. She had to do her own researching a topic, and then eventually it was a guided project helping her learn how to write a research paper to the final product of a research paper where she cited even all of her references and all that kind of stuff. And so she did 2 of those. I picked up, we had Reading Detective. We had paused it from last year and we continued on, and she went through 2 Reading Detective books. Wordly Wise was a really excellent bonus to add on. I had noticed that there was a vocabulary words that I had expected her to be able to know because she had been reading really well for such a long time, but realizing there's sometimes some vocabulary words that she did not understand, but wasn't asking, I don't know what this means. Spelling workout, again, super fast but effective. She's, I think, 2 grades above in spelling workout for that. In that series. Writing and rhetoric was also a good hit. We finished it off this past year, but we finished it early, and I did not pick up the next book. To explain that just briefly, but you can look back at an old video, 2 videos ago, I believe. My daughter is actually going to be going to a private school in September, and so I didn't want to start picking up new curriculum that we would not finish. And she also was given some story starters. I generated some story starters for her, and she would give me some creative writing where she would write short stories, and her assignments were longer than her younger sisters, but she really enjoyed that. She does love creative writing. In fact, she aspires to publish a book, fiction, a work of fiction someday. And also she would do a lot of narrate for me. So for all of our subjects, she had a narration journal, and she would have to write out all of her narrations. She would do a few a day for each subject. She would do one for science, she'd do one for history. We were also doing Shakespeare narrations, Plutarch, different things like that. And so her writing and her narrations was also part of her language arts, because that was how she was really improving in her writing. Writing and rhetoric also is an excellent program. If she was continuing homeschooling next year, that was a huge hit. I would definitely continue on with that. And I will be starting my grade 1 student when she gets to about grade 3 in that program. And logic from the critical thinking company. I'll put the book up here because I always forget the title. That was excellent. She is nearly done it. I think she has like 1 or 2 lessons left in that, but that was a huge hit. They were fun. They really helped her think outside of the box, and it's really to strengthen her logic and reasoning skills, which it certainly has helped her grow in that area. So that was a huge hit. She enjoyed them. The pages are colorful. The problems that she has to solve are fun. They're interesting. They're relevant. And it's something that she enjoys to do. It doesn't feel like work. In fact, it could be a puzzle that you could work on even in summer learning. A fail for us this year was I started the year attempting to do Writing with Skill and The Creative Writer, both by The Well-Trained Mind. They were both dry, a lot of reading before you even got to the writing. In fact, many lessons in both The Creative Writer and Writing with Skill didn't even involve writing. They were reading a lecture that was very detailed and very good information, but just too much reading, as if you were sitting in a lecture of a professor teaching English literature and writing at a really, top-notch level, but not actually learning to do the writing. It did apply the writing later on, but there was just pages and pages of reading in one lesson in one day, and she was just taking too long. I would take her about an hour to complete her language arts, and she wasn't complaining, she was doing it. But I realized, this is taking you too long. I would come up, she would do it independently in her room, and I know she was just sitting there trying to focus on it. And I would like, you're still working on it? What's going on? And so I pulled them back and I said, you know what, we'll pick these up another time. Let's find some other things. And what I found, what I just listed that were hits, were excellent and worked well for her. And she is an excellent writer. Naturally, without me really teaching her, she has developed excellent writing skills. And then first language lessons, I would also say was a miss. We finished it off this year, first language level 4. She is in grade 5, but for previous videos, if you noticed, we had switched to the Good and the Beautiful, which I felt was a fail that year, but she had missed out on first language level 3. So we went back because I didn't want her to miss some really important skills in sentence diagramming that began in first lessons. I don't remember what it's called. I'll put the picture here. FLL level 3. And so we were a little bit behind by a year, but the grammar in first language lessons are advanced. And so she's not behind by any means in her grammar at her age, but it just was very dry, very repetitive. We probably could have skipped first language lessons level 4, to be honest. It wasn't really any more than level 3, which was disappointing. Diagramming did go a little bit further, but it just was, it was a bit, we finished it. It was not, I think, her favorite or mine. And I feel like we were ready to move on to something else. But again, because she's going to be going to private school, I didn't want to buy new curriculum that we would start and not finish, or even, come near to complete. So we focused on other things. One of my motivations into not bothering with it is that they don't teach that kind of grammar in traditional schools. And if we homeschooled right through to the end is one thing, even a classical education, that way of learning is excellent. I love it, but it's less useful in the traditional school setting. And so my focus the remainder of the year, once we decided she was going to go to the private school, was to focus on honing the skills that she would need to be successful in the private Christian school. And so I was pulling back on subjects and things that were not as necessary and focusing in on things that would help her thrive there, if that makes sense to you at all. The other thing that I guess for us was a miss, I was excited about doing it, was Plutarch. We studied Publicola this past year, and we finished it. I was just excited to do it because we really loved the Roman histories that we studied last year in preparation for Plutarch, and they were exciting. And Plutarch was okay. I think sometimes boys might be a bit more drawn to Plutarch's lives. It wasn't as exciting for us. They're very difficult to read. We really trudged through them. We understood the story, but being female, we're less interested in war stories and heroes, I guess, and maybe that is part of the problem, but it just was not an exciting thing for us to read this year. We didn't look forward to it. We did it, we trudged through it. Yay, check it off the list. We've done Plutarch, but we didn't love it. And definitely not like the way that we loved reading Shakespeare. But Shakespeare really writes some amazing story. He's an amazing storyteller, and he covers the spectrum of excitement to, comedy, to love stories. He does it all, and it's just more fun to read. But that is all I have for you. We really had a great year. I feel really happy with this year because we succeeded. We finished out the year. My kids have grown. They are thriving. We've made some big decisions this year. And now I'm looking forward to what we are going to do in 2025, 2026. So that will be my upcoming video. I will be sharing that very soon, probably the following week, what curriculum picks I will be choosing for my grade 2 student in this coming school year. I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.